Dat Nation, welcome to the Confessional podcast. Today, talking about some more Saints news. Alvin Kamara meeting with everybody in New Orleans' favorite commissioner, Roger Goodell. Sadly, losing linebacker Andrew Dowell for the rest of the season, though at the same time, DeMarco Jackson really shining here in camp and kind of like taking that next step. Hopefully, obviously, we can't really conjecture that too much off of just what we've seen in camp, but hopefully, with him already receiving a lot of positive buzz, let's hope that continues moving in that direction, given what we just said about Dow. And just in general, we're going to hit all the topics affecting Who Dat Nation right now, which I think is a good thing. We're going to talk about Kamara, which apparently that meeting went well. Ian Rappaport talked about the suspension, and we've discussed pretty in-depth, I think, at this point, of 6 games kind of being the maximum, but potential of this being maybe only a 2-game suspension. Word coming out that it is expected. But before we get too deep into that and get y'all's opinions, what we're also going to do is, of course, invite everybody into the show. If you're in our Discord, greatly appreciate you being here. As always, it's good to see you. I know the Discord is getting really excited because the game's about here, man. We are, like, as of the recording of this, we're doing it live, 9 days away from our first preseason game. Obviously, we've got the Hall of Fame game kind of popping off now, so football's back, and I think everybody's pretty excited about it. We got our fantasy football teams set up. That's cool. And, yeah, we're going to get right into it and maybe even talk about Jack Anderson, Steel Bill, Mr. Jerry, Bim, Brian W. Deuce, good to see Chemo, Slice, Al Rowe, DJ Twigger. I know TJ, Billy Oshie, our moderators, etc., are going to be heading back in, and everybody going in and out because, football's here, and that's exciting, and that's okay. So let's discuss, while we've got the Jets and the Browns kind of going at each other right now in the Hall of Fame game, New Orleans Saints running back Alvin Kamara had a one-on-one meeting. In addition, so technically it's a one-on-two meeting, but one-on-one meeting with Roger Goodell. NFL attorney Jeff Pash was also in the meeting, or came into the meeting towards the end. And word is coming from multiple reports that the meeting went extremely well for Alvin Kamara. And what does that actually look like? Well, Jeff Duncan was reporting on this on social media and on Twitter, discussing that the expectation is there will be a suspension. But depending on how the meeting went, and Ian Rappaport talked about this, depending on how the meeting went, that could determine that the length of suspension would be shorter than maybe a lot of people were expecting in terms of numbers that we've talked about leading into this, where we had expected up to 6 games. And then we talked about, hey, now that it's no longer a criminal charge in terms of a felony or anything, the history says that this could be less. I talked about that, the precedence of what the suspensions have been in the past, and how now it seems unlikely to get a full 6-game suspension, but we still don't know exactly what it is. But the meeting today supposedly went very well. So if you're a New Orleans Saints fan, that has got to be a very big positive, with this being, I don't know, a make or break year for so many people. I think in a lot of ways it's a make or break year for Alvin Kamara. At this point in his career, he's got to show that he's still a top dog, and that's not even at all meant to down him, just being factual. It's, at this point in his career, going into his 7th year, you're going to have to show that you've got longevity, especially with a rookie there, and missing games certainly doesn't help your case for that. And then it's also from the standpoint of, well, Dennis Allen's, got something that we're talking about him being on the hot seat. I know a lot of fans would love to see DA out of here. I mean, there's plenty of people who come to our show regularly who are live viewers who are constantly saying that they want DA out, and I see it. And Pete Carmichael, probably the biggest name for me on the hot seat if I have to pick somebody from the coaching staff that I would say is there. And Alvin Kamara ties into that. The reason being, Alvin Kamara is the offense for a long time. I mean, for several years, it's been the best player. Alvin Kamara is the guy. And you've missed Michael Thomas, so that plays into it. Obviously, Drew Brees at the end of his career and then retiring, you're missing him. And you've needed Alvin Kamara to be that guy. You still want Alvin Kamara to be that guy. So we'll see how long the suspension is. But the good news is that meeting went well as I guess it can with Roger Goodell. Mr. Don says, I figured he would be set to get 6 games no matter what, but it'll be cut to 4, and I'll be delighted if he only gets 2. The 3 numbers that are circulating the most amongst the NFL analysts and those who kind of have an opinion on this is between 2 and 6 games, 2, 4, 6 being kind of the set, where I don't honestly know if I expect an appeal, and maybe that was part of this discussion. And again, this is just me giving you pure conjecture here. Maybe part of the discussion that Alvin Kamara had with Roger Goodell was, look, you agree to not go through the appeals process. You just take your suspension early, and and you're going to get the lower game amount instead of going through the long-winded process of having an appeal. Maybe that's something that they ended up discussing. I don't really know that. That hasn't been leaked. All that was said was that if this meeting went really well, and reports have come out that it has, that was going to help determine the length of the sentence. And if the longest was going to be 6 games, kind of like a guaranteed 6, then that would seem to imply that 2 and 4, et cetera, are on the table. And if you can manage to get Alvin Kamara down to a 2-game suspension, that is a huge win for New Orleans Saints fans. Then it just comes down to when are they actually going to apply the suspension. Typically, if a suspension gets laid down by the NFL, it's going to happen immediately, as in you'd miss the first 2 games. And at times in the past, we've seen where if they issue an appeal, then you're going to have that pushed down. Then suspensions can happen like week 10 of the season. So this could be one of those things where they're meeting early and like, look, we recognize that the case has got knocked down from the egregious charge that were presented, but there's still that conduct policy of the NFL. So Roger Goodell explains that a suspension has to happen, and maybe they discussed that, look, if you don't go through the appeals process, you just go ahead and take it now, kind of like taking a plea deal, and go ahead and serve your early suspension, then maybe they'll only give him 2 games. There is some precedent. We talked about this, and TJ, I don't know if you remember the episode. You're really good about bringing up some of our older episodes, but I think it was probably over a month now. We talked about the precedents of suspension with cases like this throughout the NFL, and the lowest we've seen is 1 game. But those were generally happening with on-field, inside the NFL house type of fights and stuff. Outside, usually it was more for any type of legal case, especially they got brought forth. But I would probably, if I had to push my chips on the table, I'd say 4 games is the bet I would make right now, with 2 games being a possibility. And both of those, I think, are significantly better than 6 games. And I think if you're the Saints, obviously you want the least amount possible. But since you were going into this year, like a lot of people expecting to be 6, anything's better based on previous expectations that we've been talking about for a year. Now, TJ says Zeke was able to delay his suspension because of an appeal. Correct. And I think if you're the Saints, if there's a time to lose football games, obviously there's never a time you want to lose a football game, right? Nobody wants to lose a football game. But if you're going to work on that process and you're going to get your crap together, or let's just maybe a smidge more profane, you're going to get your together, do it at the beginning of the season. Now, I'm not saying you can risk going 0-4. That's definitely not what I'm arguing at all. I'm just saying that, look, if I had to pick 2 games for Alvin Kamara to lose, like he wasn't going to be there, I would pick the first 2 weeks of the season and then have him for the other 15 games. Or if it's 4 games, I would still rather lose him for the first 4 games of the year, rely on Jamal Williams, Kendra Miller, and the rest of the Saints offense than to have Alvin Kamara, who I believe will be an extremely important part of this offense if it's successful, have him missing the 2nd or 3rd part of the season. I'd rather have it right up front. If you end up going 0-4, I was going to give a personal opinion. If the New Orleans Saints went 0-4 while Alvin Kamara was serving a suspension, that ain't on Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara does not stop this team from going 0-4. Can he stop this team from going 2-2 and maybe he flips it to 3-1 or something? Sure. But if this team goes 0-4 because Alvin Kamara is suspended, it ain't Alvin Kamara's fault. This team just sucks. I'm just going to put it out there full on bold, be honest with you. If this team goes 0-4 where Alvin Kamara is serving a suspension, if he had a 4-game suspension, then Alvin Kamara being here wouldn't have helped. Because there's obviously a whole lot more going on than just that. So I would love to hopefully see this get out of the way and see the suspension served as quickly as possible. That's what I think would be the best thing for both New Orleans and AK, and I guess for the league as well, because whether Goodell likes New Orleans or not, which I think most of us would agree he does not like the New Orleans Saints. Maybe he cares a little bit less about his hate now that Sean Payton is in Denver and he's currently talking Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets and Hackett and everybody else. Maybe the attention is kind of pushed over there now. But yeah, that's how I would see it. So I'm very glad to hear the reports coming out from Jeff Duncan, Ian Rappaport, etc., that the meeting went very well. Dennis Allen said that he expects Kamara to be back at practice on Friday, which is tomorrow. So we will see AK back practicing, and we're going to have a good week leading up to the first preseason game, where I probably don't expect to see a ton of any of your starters laying around, but time will tell. And then I'm surprised Dr. Billy Oshie is in here. because we do have to bring up one of my, I call him a friend. I definitely, talked to him when he was getting into, more of the New Orleans Saints stuff as he was covering. For those that don't know, Jeff Nowak does a lot of work with WWL, etc. Radio. He's also worked with NOLA.com. And he made a comment on social media, on X.com or Twitter.com, if y'all want to do that. He made a comment about how is it time to start talking about, because Andres Pete's been injured. For those that missed that in our last episode, is it time to start talking about Andres Pete being the backup left guard and simply starting Hurst as the left guard? And I don't know, that's an interesting topic to bring up. And I think those type of conversations are really popping up because, one, we're dealing with injury. On the defensive side, the biggest injury is going to be Andrew Dowell, sadly tearing his ACL, and he is going to miss the remainder of the season. And I don't know if I can call it a big loss, but it does really sting because this is a guy that I think a lot of people were excited to see where he could go. He was, even people talking about, hey, we saw Caden Ellis develop. Maybe Andrew Dowell could be the next one. Well, he's not now. He is now going to miss the entire year. Now, you still have DeMarco Jackson, who's a name that a lot of Saints fans have been looking forward to, which I think is really neat. But as we're looking at these training camp scenarios, and we're looking especially these backup positions and maybe some of the tertiary and secondary starter positions in terms of importance, we look at left guard. Yeah, you want to have a good left guard, but that's not as important as having a great quarterback or great wide receiver, et cetera, or even a great center. So maybe that's a discussion that ends up getting brought up, and we start looking. Now, do I think that New Orleans is looking at that? No, not necessarily. But I do think that if you're talking about just putting together this team, if he's already suffering from those type of issues now and is not even looking good when he's in camp, it is something that we need to think about. How do we start approaching that? And you still have guys like Nick Saldivari that we talk about, who I've talked about. I feel like he's going to be the long-term replacement for Pete, but you also still have James Hurst there, and they are working through the O-line. And in the next 2 weeks is when we can really start evaluating the O-line, because now they're practicing with pads on. You've got preseason games coming up, and now you're actually going to do a little bit more evaluation towards these guys. We'll see. We'll see. Godfather, by the way, good to see you. It's been a while. I'm glad you're coming on back, because now the season's starting back up. It's good to see you. Good to see you. He just says Jamal and Kendra Miller are more than enough to hold down the fort while Alvin Kamara is gone. I'll make one comment. I'm not trying to be contrarian. I'm just trying to be honest. I feel like we are crowning Kendra Miller a little bit too soon. Now, I'm not trying to say Miller is going to be bad. I've been very excited about him as well. But I also have to be very careful when I say, or even want to read statements like Jamal and Kendra Miller are going to hold down the fort while AK is gone. I don't know if I'm ready to make that type of a statement until I actually see Miller doing it at the NFL. Now, I've talked plenty about how I believe, and I think history shows this, that running back is the most transferable position in the NFL, as in it is easier to go from running back in college to running back in the NFL. But still, I'm not ready to make the statement of the New Orleans Saints are going to hold down the fort, because the closer we get to game day, also a little bit more of those butterflies start fluttering. And I remember that, hey, I like Derek Carr, but I don't know about Derek Carr in New Orleans yet. I don't trust Pete Carmichael at all. I've never seen Kendra Miller take an NFL snap. So I'm not honestly believing that they're more than enough to hold down the fort, but I really want to give them the opportunity to prove that they are. But just a little splash of Revolution reality coming in right now. Let's just who's watching the game tonight. I'll admit that I didn't want to miss the show, but I do have the game pulled up, as in like I've got it in the background. Jets are currently winning 6-0 over the Cleveland Browns here in the Hall of Fame game, which, hey, that's cool. Shout out preseason football. It's back. We're back. It's back. Yes, I'm excited. I like football being back. College football coming back. Professional football coming back. Not that I have any hate towards the XSFL or, in the XFL and USFL and all these other FLs, but nothing like professional football from the NFL. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Welcome back, Joe. It's good to see you. And says you got to go get a linebacker for sure. So right now, your current roster, if you're going by who New Orleans currently has left, now that Andrew Dowell has gone down, here's the Saints linebacking core: Pete Warner, Demario Davis, Zach Bond, DeMarco Jackson, Ty Summers, who is I don't know if I'd call him like a career journeyman exactly, because he's only been with, I think, 3 teams now. But this is a guy that was on the practice squad with Jacksonville, on the practice squad with Green Bay, and he's 27. I mean, I guess similar age to how Kate Ellis popped off, but just giving you a name of who is there. You also still have Nefi Sewell, Nick Anderson, the rookie out of Tulane, who I am admittedly rooting very hard for. Want to see the Green Wave guys make it in the NFL, so rooting for Nick Anderson to find a way to make a spot on this team, whether it is through special teams or even as the backup linebacker. And he's got that dog in him. He's young, but he's undersized. He's 5'9" and 230. And so many teams are not going to give him a chance because of that alone. And I understand why. But at the same time, I love rooting for those type of guys, those type of players. Nick Anderson is somebody that I'm wanting to see have some level of success at the NFL level. And then your last linebacker that you have at the moment is Ryan Connolly. And you also have Anthony Orji. Yeah, that's the man's name, Anthony Orji. So no Andrew Dowell that he's on IR, but you do still have a couple of more there. And then, of course, we just lost Trey Turner last week as well. So a couple of major injuries where it seems like some of the other NFL teams are able to have no injuries as they're going through training camp. The Saints are getting major guys, or I mean, at least players are having major injuries going to IR. That's kind of annoying. So, yeah. See Underhill on the Pat McAfee show today. I'll be honest, Jose, I don't watch Pat McAfee. I don't support Pat McAfee, and I don't like Pat McAfee. I mean, what he was like years ago, I actually really enjoyed his content, but he's been doing the stuff over the past like 6 to 12 months I just really don't like. So I don't follow any Pat McAfee. I know Nick was on that show to talk about Jimmy Graham a little bit, which is cool. And I'm definitely not like scolding Nick for going on Pat's show, but I don't watch Pat anymore. Pat's gone off the deep end for me. So he's gone way too much into like the realm of Barstool style show, and that's just not for me anymore. Mr. Don says, I was a basketball player in my playing days, but as a spectator, I'm completely more of a football guy than a basketball guy. Completely fair. Still, go Pelicans. Go Pelicans. Antonio says, should we trust Baum? No, absolutely not. However, for the first time in years, we have positive reports of Baum coming out. Like the first time since, 2020. We've had some like positive news of how he's trying to transition that linebacker spot. So maybe it's finally clicking for him to be that backup at that position. And TJ, one of the most recent things was he made a very, very just poor taste joke about Michigan State and just a lot of stuff that's going on over there. It's just, again, y'all follow whoever you want to, but not me. DeAndre says Ty Summers has 90 speed on Madden. Now, I have not purchased Madden in some time, but yeah, cool. I would love to play Madden. I honestly would love to play Madden, like maybe for y'all on Twitch and just kind of hang out. Because I do have a Twitch channel, I have a Kick channel. I might do it on Kick. But I have not purchased Madden in a while. So I'll just be honest. The only reason I've even considered purchasing Madden this year is they've improved Madden from what I've read on their blog post, EA's blog post. And I'm looking forward to that. Now, truth is, a lot of the improvements coming out to the franchise mode this year for Madden were things that were actually already part of Madden's franchise mode like a decade ago, 15 years ago. We grew up with a lot of the things that they're re-adding, but I'm still glad that they're going to be there. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. So, yeah, Madden's cool. If y'all want to do some Madden stuff this year, let me know. We'll discuss it on Twitter and Discord, and maybe we'll set something up. Maybe we'll have some games where I get completely trashed because I've not played Madden in years, and y'all challenge me to PvP over there, and I lose. 1v1s, I'm going to get wrecked. I'm better at 2K than I am Madden at this point. I can definitely say that. Definitely say that. McAfee has gone the Joe Rogan route. We'll be accusing Mahomes of being an alien in his next podcast. You know, Godfather, I know you're halfway joking there, but honestly, you're not too far off. I mean, Pat McAfee's become the guy, like, he's willing to make, jokes about sexual assault cases and talk about anything he wants to and not worry about repercussions. It's more power to him if people enjoy that. Obviously, people enjoy it because he has really good ratings, right? People watch the Pat McAfee show. That's just not for me. I want to have actual analysis. I want to actually discuss the sports. I actually want to know what's going on. And look, I've given Pat McAfee show credit before because he's definitely busted out some news that nobody else had. So cool. But it's just going in a direction that I personally don't enjoy. So, and yeah, hiding behind the it was a joke thing. Just, yeah, if y'all enjoy it, y'all enjoy it. It's just not for me. I want actual football, and And it's the same type of complaints I've had about, Skip Bayless and, Colin Cowherd. I want to talk about the topic, like the sport that we're actually watching. I actually want to get in-depth analysis of it, whether we're talking about analytics or film study. I don't care. I actually want to talk about the sport and not just being stupid. But maybe I'm just becoming old and boring, and that happens too. We all get old. We all get old. Oh, man. Let me change topics before we get too deep down this curve. I saw this name mentioned in chat, so I want to bring it up because we did lose Ty Summers. I'm sorry, we lost Andrew Dowell. Didn't lose Ty Summers, but I'm surprised this didn't come up earlier. I'm going to talk about it anyway. Quan Alexander is, back on a football field, playing with Pittsburgh. Doesn't look like New Orleans is going to have a shot to get him. Now, I only bring this up because of the Andrew Dowell news with him going to IR. And I figured this would be something that New Orleans Saints fans immediately go, hey, we need this guy. We need this guy. But for those that don't know, he got signed to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there was even an article that came out on Sports Illustrated. I don't know how many people still read Sports Illustrated. And that was really big when we were a kid. But an article came out this morning on Sports Illustrated talking about how his first couple days in training camp, Quan Alexander was like the best linebacker the Pittsburgh Steelers have. Now, how much I actually believe that, I don't really know. But I know that's going to rub some Saints fans the wrong way to think if Quan Alexander comes out and has a hell of a year, well, there you go. But here's what Mike Tomlin said, because I did pull up the article just to give you a little bit of read. But here's what Mike Tomlin said about Quan Alexander. He's a veteran. He might be new to us, but he's not new to the environments like this or to professional football, and it's showing in a hurry. Took his first practice this week and apparently has recorded numerous, simulated tackles for loss and things like that. So Quan Alexander is now in a black and yellow, not the black and gold. And if you do like to follow players, because look, I know there's some fans out there of various sports who are like, hey, you got to follow only the team. And this is your team. You can't have multiple things. I don't believe that. So if you like to follow players because you believe in players and you really enjoy players, which a lot of people love Quan Alexander. So if you want to follow Quan Alexander this year, he is currently with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Apparently looking really good. Antonio says, I really wanted Quan. I wanted to bring back Quan if you thought that your linebacker position was in trouble as you got toward the end of preseason camp. And he was somebody that was on my radar of, I really hope they're paying attention to bringing him in if you end up not having anything working out. When I look at this roster, we've got 2 starting linebackers because you only really play a nickel set. You do have kind of another linebacker ready to go in the strong side. But you look at what you have over there in Pittsburgh. Here's the linebacker group. Pittsburgh. So obviously you got TJ Watt, Golden Boy TJ Watt. But then it's Cole Holcomb, Eldon Roberts, and Alex Highsmith. And then Tanner Muse, Marcus Golden, Nick Herbig. It's not hard for me to imagine Quan Alexander, if he's healthy, finding a way to get snaps there. Like when I see their linebacker core, I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying it's TJ Watt and a whole bunch of role players and guys who maybe are good, but not everybody else who's great. It's definitely not the Dome Patrol. So, more power to Quan, because when he is healthy, like truly, when Quan Alexander is healthy, he's a very good player. So I hope that he has success until he plays New Orleans, and then I hope he does terrible. And that's just the case for any player that I like that goes to another team. I hope they do amazing until when they play New Orleans and they just look like absolute dog. John says, I'll have a good year. Defensive players always play well in Pittsburgh for some reason. It's like hitting in Coors Field in baseball. I don't really catch that reference because I'm not the biggest baseball fan anymore, but I will respect that it exists. Might have something to do that those franchises have a hell of a reputation for defensive-minded coaching. The Ravens, for a long time, have had, arguably some of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. Mike Tomlin is consistently one of the better defensive coach teams, leading one of the better defensively coached teams in the NFL. And I just think that the AFC North, for whatever reason, you have multiple teams there that really put an onus on defense. You just don't really find everywhere else. Example. The AFC South does not, and I can't honestly think of an era where the AFC South was really putting a big focus on defense. They've always put a focus on offense. You look at Jacksonville, Houston, you look at even Tennessee. in their old school, we're going to beat you with running philosophy of the recent years. They just don't put as much of a focus on defense, even though Tennessee is led by a defensive head coach. That's just a division that's more known for offense. And, of course, the Colts for about 40 years with Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, et cetera, focusing on the offense. So it's definitely just something I think that you have certain teams, they have a philosophy that they kind of stick to. And honestly, New Orleans did for a long time. I mean, 15 years of Sean Payton, it was very clear that the focus and philosophy was offense, and defense was secondary. And if you had a great defense, then you had a shot at the Super Bowl, but they focused on offense first. And you've had a little bit of a paradigm shift here where DA clearly focuses on defense first and offense is secondary. That doesn't mean they don't think offense is important, but look, when you've got a guy who said I wasn't going to be the offensive coordinator, then you make him the offensive coordinator, then you don't replace him the next year, whether you can find somebody else or not, it's very clear that the focus is on the defensive side of the ball. And hopefully the offensive side works itself out by inserting better players. And I do think that there is more talent on the offensive side of the ball this year than there was last year or the year before. But yeah, I think maybe that's just a philosophy thing. And Don says maybe it's the field. I don't know. It's kind of like, we talk about the injuries that New Orleans sustains, and people bring up the fact that they play in a dome on turf and everything. And there's definitely a correlation that we've seen historically between turf and certain types of injuries. But overall, how important is it? Can't really say. And by the way, JL, I didn't want to skip it, but I respect the joke that you played where instead of saying Nick right, you said Nick wrong. And it's a dad joke, and it's a little lame, but at the same time, I respect it. I appreciate you saying it. I really do. That's another guy that just could not get New Orleans football out of his mouth. Y'all can interpret that how you want to. Interpret that how you want to. So, yeah. Lame dad jokes are welcome. I agree, TD. So, in terms of the main topics, we've covered our main two. And there are a couple other things that I do want to bring up. Now, we will have a full, and I'm excited about this, letting you know, we have a full in-depth breakdown. We are actually going to go previewing football games again. So for those who like to keep your calendars ready, y'all do realize preseason football is literally right around the corner. The next game, New Orleans Saints, first game, August 13th, which is 10 days away. So if you are focusing on your calendar, here's what I want you to know. We've got an episode next Tuesday. That's the 8th. We got an episode the 10th, 1 week from now. 1 week from now will be a preview episode talking about what we need to look at focusing on the Chiefs. I'm trying to prep y'all because that also means the 13th, after the game, we're going to have our first podcast following a game this year. So be ready, be prepared. It's that time of year, ladies and gentlemen. We're back to 3 episodes a week starting next week. And we're back to previews and recaps and analysis. And if I can get my hands on it, film studies. And get some all 22. We're going to do that as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We're already there, y'all. We made it through the hard part. We're literally a week away from back to being full swing football. And I know some of y'all say, hey, preseason doesn't matter. But let me tell you right now, it matters at this moment. You know why it matters? Because we've been suffering for months without seeing any type of football. So damn it, I don't care if it is preseason. I'm excited. I mean, right now, Twitter is ablaze with Zach Wilson highlights. Absolutely nuts. I actually see it right now because I have Twitter pulled up while I'm talking to y'all. And Zach Wilson literally is a single high read with, receivers having one-on-one coverage on the outside. He just threw like a 40-yard bomb, and people are going crazy. Oh, is Zach Wilson back? No, it was an easy read and a one-on-one throw. But that's how exciting football is. We're taking singular plays, and we're hyping up like famous draft bust. Zach Wilson. That's how I love football. That's how you know it's back. Everybody's a competitor again. I'm really excited about that. Vlad says, I've been saying since the start of the offseason that we need more depth at linebacker, and this injury reminds me of that. So, Vlad, I both agree and disagree. So many people still think of New Orleans needing 3 starting linebackers, but the truth is they don't play 3 starting linebackers. They play 2. And when you have 2 starting linebackers, that means that you need to have 2 quality backups. Only 4 linebackers. Now, there are definitely times where they play a base defense, but the truth is that is very, very rare in the Dennis Allen era, and unless that's changing, which it could change. I mean, it literally could. He could be adjusting things as the league adjusts, and good coaches do that. That doesn't really bother me as much right now because New Orleans is simply not that team. They're not trying to have a full set of linebackers. They're not trying to have 4 guys on the field or 3 guys on the field. They are a nickel-based defense. And as long as Pete Warner's healthy, and Demario Davis is healthy, and those two are playing studly, it doesn't matter. Now, yeah, you do want to have another guy that can come in at various plays, run-stopping situations, goal line situations where you have that. But I still haven't been terribly worried about it. Now, losing Andrew Dowell sucks. I mean, he's definitely a backup that a lot of people really liked, including in the facility. But also, you still got guys like DeMarco Jackson and Ty Summers, who I think can be capable backups, as well as being young guys who potentially could be contributors in the future. So we just got to wait and see how that plays out. I totally understand it. And I think depending on the team, there are definitely teams that need a lot of quality linebacker talent and depth. But New Orleans is just not a team that utilizes it that much, which is a little crazy because you think about it, the Saints, some of the best plays they've had in recent years have come from that linebacker group. And that just kind of speaks to the power and the gravitas that Demario Davis has and how good he is. And it's one of the reasons that he continually gets voted in the top 100 and top 50 by his peers in the NFL when they do the NFL top 100. But just relatively speaking, the Saints don't need as many quality linebackers as other teams because they don't play that type of football. And whether you like or dislike that type of football, it's not something that concerns me personally too much, but I always want as many quality players as I can find. And like I said, losing Andrew Dowell sucks because losing anybody sucks, right? Nobody wants to lose anybody. It sucks that we keep seeing, or at least I keep seeing, other linebackers across the league who, maybe get an injury and I got a calf injury and they're out for a week. And then like Trey Turner and Andrew Dowell, like within a week of each other, both are gone to IR for the year. It just really sucks. But the truth is Andrew Dowell was not a guy who had really popped off too much. Remember, this is a guy that's never started a game, but he was a dressing player for 2 straight years for New Orleans. I think that does matter. But he's mostly a special teams type guy, which is completely okay. That's not a knock at him. I'm just saying that in terms of depth, I don't think you're necessarily losing too much there. What you're mostly losing is a very quality special teams player. I think that's what the team is going to miss the most, is his ability on special teams. And the good news is you can usually find a guy to step up and fill that role if you have good special teams coaching. The bad news is, well, maybe he was going to be the next Caden Ellis as a linebacker. We just won't know, and we'll maybe see next year. So wait and see. There's Don says Demario Davis is the best free agent signing in franchise history, not named Drew Brees. I would agree. I would also say that Demario Davis is the best linebacker that New Orleans has had since the Dome Patrol. And I honestly don't think it's close. And I think that head-to-head, there's an argument for Demario Davis to truly be the best inside linebacker New Orleans has ever had. I do realize that Demario Davis plays in multiple positions, but with him being a nickel guy, he usually is lined up inside the tackles at an interior position, but he will also play the weak side backer, depending on the alignment, the coverage that he has to get called into. But I think there's a legitimate argument for Demario Davis being the best interior linebacker of all time for New Orleans. And that's not meant to throw any shade at guys like Jonathan Vilma and Sam Mills, who's, Hall of Famer and stuff. I just think that Demario Davis has been that good. But I would take, and I've said this before, I would take Demario Davis over Jonathan Vilma 100 times out of 100. And I love Jonathan Vilma. But Jonathan Vilma is insanely good, amazing leader on the field. But so is Demario Davis. And in terms of who plays football better, Demario Davis. And again, I realize that Vilma's got a ring. And for some people, that matters. To me, I'm not going to act like Jonathan Vilma having a Super Bowl ring means anything in the scale of how good he is compared to another football player. And if I could have both of them on the field at the same time, dream scenario, right? But yeah, give me Demario Davis over Vilma. And Vilma's great, man. Remember, Vilma was Rookie of the Year with the Jets, and that's fantastic. In terms of how they play with New Orleans, Vilma was here 6 years, right? Now, his last year in the league, 2013, obviously didn't go well at all. Only ended up playing 1 game. That sucked. But he had, 2 Pro Bowls with New Orleans, never made the All-Pro team, and was just a really good player, but he was never an amazing player. Never an amazing player. Davis is amazing. As in, there are legitimate arguments for the past 5 years in New Orleans, where you can talk about him being the best linebacker at his position. Demario Davis has had 4 straight All-Pros. 4 straight. 3 second team, 1 first team, and he made the Pro Bowl last year. So just in terms of hardware, on-field performance tape, give me Demario Davis over Jonathan Vilma every day. That doesn't mean that Jonathan Vilma sucks. We're just talking about a guy being like great or really good versus arguably the best at his position every year. Yeah, I wish Demario Davis had a Super Bowl ring, but I mean it's even like, I know we're kind of rabbit trailing here, but just like to give more love to Demario. Like you think about how good Vilma was, but what's crazy is Vilma was a much smaller linebacker than Demario Davis. But Demario does what Vilma did, weighing 25 pounds more. Vilma was like a 6'1", 230-pound linebacker. Very undersized, especially for the era, which is actually makes it how he played even more impressive. But Demario Davis is a 6'3", 250-pound traditional badass large linebacker who also is elite in coverage, elite in run stuffing, and can rush the passer. Again, that's not a shade at anything about Jonathan Vilma. But Jonathan Vilma was not near the pass rusher that Demario Davis is. Jonathan Vilma was great in coverage, but so is Demario Davis. Demario Davis is a hell of a lot more of a thumper than Vilma. Vilma was good, but Vilma didn't have that extra oomph that comes with having 25 more pounds of muscle that Demario has. Demario is just special. Demario is just special and smart. Both of them have like elite football playing IQ, as in they understand the game. They were great on-field leaders, but you took Jonathan Vilma's understanding of the game and put it in a better body. Simple as that. I know we don't like to judge people for their bodies, but some people are just better genetically gifted. And Demario Davis is not only genetically gifted, he also has the same level of, football acumen that Jonathan Vilma did. So anyway, 5-minute little spill of why I believe Demario Davis is the best interior linebacker New Orleans has ever had. It's even if you go back to the Dome Patrol days, I'll pull it up now because I don't have in front of me, but I'm pretty sure no other interior linebacker for New Orleans has had multiple All-Pros, as in like 4 All-Pros. So Sam Mills, who I went and looked up just right now, has had he had 2 All-Pros with New Orleans, and he played there 9 years. 2 of them. Second team All-Pros. Again, that's not shade thrown. I'm not throwing anything negative at him. Just like, that's a Hall of Fame level player. 2 of them. Then you have like Vaughn Johnson, who had 1 All-Pro in his 8 years in New Orleans. Second team All-Pro. Just giving an example. I mean, you got to do that to give you a Hall of Fame comparison to. He had 2. That's just how the level of Demario Davis has been. Just crazy, crazy good. If you can make a modern day Dome Patrol using recent Saints, who would they be? So I'm going to take your assignment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 4-3 defense, 3-4 defense, and I'm going to have Jonathan Vilma, Demario Davis in the middle, and then if we're talking about just playing football, all right, we're just talking about the ability to play football. Please don't judge me. Please don't be mad. Please don't say anything super negative. But give me Junior Gillette as the weak side linebacker. I know y'all gonna talk trash about it. I'm just saying, give me Junior Gillette as the weak side linebacker. I'm just saying, if you talk about recent New Orleans Saints players, give me Beltman as my weak side guy, who I'm using mostly as a pass rusher anyway in a 3-4 alignment. Whether I'm doing my under alignment or I'm going to line them out wide in a weak side set. And then on the strong side, I can list a lot of names of recent linebackers who I would give, for New Orleans. I just don't know if I can think of any strong side guy that I would call elite. I mean, I could maybe list Scott Fujita, put him over there on the strong side. Maybe. I really wouldn't throw Scott Shanley in there. Wouldn't call Pete Warner in there yet. But I would definitely have Vilma and Demario in my interior. And then I would probably have Beltman be my primary stand-up pass rusher on the outside. Although he also had that, you remember Gillette had that 4-point stance he got down into, and he could motor it. So I just, yeah. Lester says AJ Klein. I think that's fair. AJ Klein is still in the league. He was last year. I don't know if he is right now, but AJ Klein was a starter for Buffalo for, 2 years? I don't know if he's still with somebody right now, because I know last year he was on like 3 different teams. But yeah, he went from Carolina to us. Really solid player, but I wouldn't call him great. I definitely wouldn't list AJ Klein as a great player. A really solid guy. Let me see if AJ Klein's with the team right now, because I honestly don't know. Yeah, he's with the Bills. Yeah, he's with the Bills. So shout out AJ Klein. Maybe we can throw him in there too. Pull my fingers at Swilling and Jackson. Yeah, I mean, Pat Swilling and Jackson, obviously, but we're talking about if we create a dome patrol with modern or more recent New Orleans Saints, obviously I'm not going to include Swilling and Jackson. But it's, I put it this way, and if we're going to compare guys, Pat Swilling and Ricky Jackson are the outside combo that Vilma and Demario Davis would be as an inside combo. Yeah, because I honestly can't name a single guy as good as Pat Swilling or Ricky Jackson in the past 25 years that play outside linebacker for New Orleans. Nobody. I don't even think it's close. Honestly, the past 30 years. And we went back all the way to 1993. The nearest person you're going to find is Pat Swilling and Ricky Jackson. And nobody's even in their stratosphere as an outside linebacker. But interior linebackers, you got two great ones. You got two great ones in Vilma and Demario Davis. And I really want to see Pete Warner become that next guy if he can be healthy. Yeah, and shout out, by the way, to AJ Klein for still being in the league. But somebody just called him 40. Believe it or not, AJ Klein's 32. So I feel the poor guy just got called 30 years old. That man is 32. He just turned 32, by the way. He's younger than me. He's younger than me. He's younger than me. So anyway, great question, Lester. I enjoyed that one. That was a good little think question. But I guess it just kind of speaks to how poorly overall Saints defenses have been that we can't really name an elite linebacker. I can name elite safeties, not counting number 42. I can name elite safeties. I can name elite defensive tackles. I can name elite defensive ends, but I really can't name elite outside linebackers. Really, they've had elite players at every position except that in the 21st century. Elite safety, Sammy Knight. Elite 3-tech, Leroy Glover. Elite defensive end, Cameron Jordan. Elite, corners, Lattimore. They exist, but outside linebacker, nobody. New Orleans has just not cultivated that. Mr. Don says he used to rush the passer every time with Pat Swilling on Tecmo Bowl. Nice. How about a custom offense? Well, Drew Brees. Immediately, Drew Brees. Then I would have Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram in their prime. I know many people would probably want to throw in maybe Deuce McAllister there. I respect that, but I'm just going to keep it real. I already saw what Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara did as a unit. And for those 2 years, they were not even arguably, they were the best duo running back in NFL history. Nobody did what they ever did. So, yeah, I'm not saying Deuce isn't great, but if I'm building my custom offense, I'm going to go with a duo that I have literally seen be the best duo of running backs ever, statistically. So, we'll do that. On my offensive line, Teron Armstead, Jari Evans. Center's a little bit tough for me because there's a couple of names that I can pull at center that I think are really good. I mean, I do like Eric McCoy. I like Max Unger. I don't know if any of them were like elite. I might go with Max Unger on that one. Right tackle, go with Ryan Ramczyk over the past so many years. I might. God, this is tough. Do I take Teron Armstead off in favor of Willie Rofe, or do I keep Armstead? I really struggle with that one. I would take Michael Thomas. I would also, if I could manage to get him to not fight with Michael Thomas, I'd take Brandon Cooks as my starting flanker. Tight end would probably have to just be Jimmy Graham. I don't really think you could debate that. My favorite slot guy would be Willie Snead. Sorry for all the Lance Moore fans. I'd pick Willie Snead. And when Willie Snead didn't have whatever the hell happened to Willie Snead to make him stop being Willie Snead in New Orleans, with his DUIs and stuff, all that happened. But Willie Snead, when he was good, was damn good as a slot guy. And I thought that he was even better than Lance Moore. But we can debate that, and that's completely fine if y'all choose Lance over him. But, yeah, that'd probably be the basics of my offense. The basics of it. Both Ingram and Kamara went to the Pro Bowl the same year. Both Ingram and Kamara, again, statistically, in terms of yards, touchdowns, no running back duo has ever done what they did. They literally set records. So, no Taysom, you're disappointed. Taysom's an X factor. So, if you told me to pick the best Saints X factor of the past 30 years, it'd be Darren Sproles, then Taysom Hill, then Reggie Bush. If you just say, hey, who do you want that isn't a full-time 100% starter, but who is the lifeblood injection, like super, snort lines of, you know what I'm talking about, like fuel injection, Darren Sproles, then Taysom Hill, then there's a gap in Reggie Bush. So, but if I'm building a custom offense and custom defense, I'm usually focusing on players that are there 100% of the time. My question is, how much of the center being elite versus Drew making them look elite? I mean, you can make that argument that Drew made everybody look better than they are, but at the same time, sometimes guys are just good, and you can see that when you study them individually. Max Unger was really good, and Eric McCoy's been really good individually. I mean, I've watched Eric McCoy go one-on-one with Vita Vea and stonewall Vita Vea, and not many guys in the NFL can do that. So, again, I'm not saying that Eric McCoy is the best center in the NFL, but dude has done some great things, and Max did some great things as well. So, certainly did better than that certain someone that we picked up from Chicago. Anybody remember the center we picked up from Chicago that basically tried to fight everybody and didn't last more than like 6 games and retired? Anybody remember that? Great times. Great times. Shout out Olin Kreutz. You are definitely forgotten. That man was an all-pro, like, consistent Pro Bowler with Chicago for like 13 years. Came to New Orleans, played like, 5 games, tried to start like 18 fights and was gone. Gone. What a time to be alive. Steel Bill says, give you Reggie. Look, I love Reggie Bush. If we're just talking about X Factor, he's got nothing on Darren Sproles and he's got nothing on Taysom Hill. The only thing that he did better than either one of them consistently was special teams. But on offense, nah. Give me Taysom Hill and Darren Sproles. So, and that's not meant just to be disrespectful to Reggie, because Reggie has got entire games that we think about and go, oh yeah, he's great. But y'all got to remember, Darren Sproles set the NFL record that still stands to this day for scrimmage yards in that 2011 offense. That was Darren Sproles, not Reggie Bush. Taysom Hill literally has, in 5 years, like 40-something touchdowns. Reggie Bush didn't do none of that. So as an X factor, yeah, give me Hill and Sproles. It's not that I don't like Reggie Bush. I'm just talking about, especially when you're talking about value, the fact that Reggie Bush was the 2nd overall pick. You didn't really get a ton of value out of Reggie. I mean, it was great. It worked. You won a Super Bowl. Fantastic. But you want my opinion? Look, I like Reggie. I hate what happened to him at the end of his career, you know, with the Rams sideline basically ruining his body. That sucked. But, yeah. Fun number for you. Total number of rushing and receiving touchdowns for Reggie Bush in New Orleans, 29. If you add his special team touchdowns in, literally if you add his special team touchdowns in, he had 33 TDs as a New Orleans Saint. That's it. I mean, I guess there's nothing to shake a finger at. That's it. 33. That's all. Taysom Hill's over 40 in less games. Same. Taysom is special as an X factor. Reggie was a dog for us. He really wasn't, though. Look, Reggie was a great utility player, but Reggie never found any level of consistency in the Saints offense because the Saints offense used him as a complementary piece. They don't run their offense with a traditional full-time running back. They just never have. Even now, they don't do that. And Reggie just was never an elite player with New Orleans. He just wasn't. You remember that Reggie, his entire time in New Orleans, which was 5 full seasons, not to mention his injuries, but 5 full seasons, Reggie Bush only had over 1,000 scrimmage yards once. That was his rookie year. Reggie Bush never had a single season his entire career with anybody where he scored 10 TDs or more. Ever. Not to mention that my man had a fumbleitis problem in New Orleans, too, that some of you forget about. But Reggie Bush had, 20 fumbles in New Orleans? Again, Reggie Bush wasn't bad, but Reggie Bush wasn't next level. Reggie Bush wasn't setting records. Reggie Bush was not, except for one particular game that I give him credit for single-handedly dominating, which is the Arizona Cardinal game, the playoff game, that first wild card game in 2009. It just wasn't who Reggie Bush was in New Orleans. He was a very good player, but was he literally winning games single-handedly that you can say Taysom Hill has done and that even Darren Sproles did? No. He was just part of a great offense. And he was a very, very electrifying player. If I'm taking just a pure X factor, give me Taysom, give me Darren Sproles. So you lost your fantasy final with Kamara scoring 6 TDs. Damn. That's a hell of a Christmas present, right? David says, I did forget about his fumbleitis. And I'm not trying to like call out Reggie and call him trash. I always worry about when we get in these discussions is some people are going to interpret what I'm saying as saying that one guy was just awful. Because Reggie wasn't awful with New Orleans. He wasn't. But there's so many things that we forget, good and bad, about players after they leave. And one of Reggie's problems is the dude fumbled the ball a lot. I mean, it was a constant issue. And I think you got to hold that against him a little bit. He didn't have that problem when he went to Detroit for whatever reason. He didn't have that problem in Detroit. He was with Detroit for what, 3 years? That wasn't an issue with him. It was in Miami, I think, 3 years. I just don't think that he was as electrifying or as impactful as Taysom or Darren Sproles. I want to make sure I mention Darren Sproles a lot because it might not matter to everybody else in chat. But Darren Sproles, again, literally set and still holds 12 years later. Keep in mind that Darren Sproles still has this record when the league has added more games to the season. He literally holds the record for scrimmage yards. I don't think that gets talked about enough in terms of like impressive things. How does that not get brought up enough? Seeing Darren Taysom better? Yep, sure am. You watch the Saints as Jeff Blake? I mean, Top, it doesn't really matter. One, you're allowed to have your opinion. But length of time you've watched something doesn't make you more qualified to make a statement. I just want to point that out. Now, if you have a difference of opinion, it's completely okay. I respect it. But just because you watch something longer doesn't mean you're more knowledgeable about the subject. And that goes for anybody on anything. But if you have Reggie as your best X factor of all time, that's completely okay. Rock it. Rock it. Don says, I liked Reggie Bush, but at the same time, he wasn't nearly as good as he was supposed to be. That's also true. He did not live up to his draft hype. That's just a fact. I mean, we talk about what you expect from a top 5 or top 10 pick. Reggie was only in New Orleans for 5 years. So Reggie wasn't even rocking. Like, that would be the equivalent of right now you draft Bijan Robinson for Atlanta and you literally give him his 5th-year option, then let him walk. Sean Payton held him back. Sean Payton is, like, statistically, analytically, and historically, the best offensive mind that the NFL has ever seen. Nobody's ever done a lot of what he has done offensively. Now, does that mean that Sean Payton is the best head coach of all time? No, definitely not. But in terms of offense, nobody has actually come even close to doing what Sean Payton has done. And if Sean Payton looks at Reggie Bush and says he's not good enough to be the guy, well, I think he's more qualified than any of us for that one. I mean, hell, he won a Super Bowl, went to 3 NFC championship games, something that New Orleans as a franchise never did. So, but if you like Reggie Bush, more power to you, man. Reggie Bush was a great player. I just don't think he was better than Darren Sproles or Taysom Hill. But it is what it is. It's not a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. Sean's really good. Breeze helped it. Well, of course. Having a Hall of Fame quarterback certainly helps. But I'm not going to take away from Bill Belichick because he had Tom Brady. So, Reggie's probably why you're a Saints fan. I remember the hype, because I was in high school when Reggie Bush got drafted. And the level of hype about Reggie Bush following to us was insane. I remember it happening. I mean, there were just discussions about how New Orleans was going to have the best offense in football because they managed to get Reggie Bush, and Houston was these huge idiots for passing on Reggie. And that didn't pan out that way. It just didn't. Again, that's not trashing Reggie, but he did not live up to top 5 pick for anybody. He didn't do it with Miami. He didn't do it with Detroit. He was good, but he was definitely not the level of hype he was out of college. And it's like a teacher said, literally that Reggie Bush, when he came into the league, they would focus on him as the offense in terms of like covering New Orleans, not Drew Brees and anything. And I'm not trying to dump on Reggie, but that dude was not top 5 level good in terms of being drafted in the top 5. He was second overall in the draft. Second overall. And he only had 5,490 career rushing yards. And it's kind of like Don says, like, if you do hindsight's 2020, right? We can always do hindsight's 2020. Who truly had the better career, Mario Williams or Reggie Bush? And the answer is Mario Williams. Now, both teams did better than the Brickishaw Ferguson, who went to New York. I don't think he had a bad career, but I don't think it was better than Mario Williams. But yeah. Now, Mario Williams, did he live up to being the number 1 overall pick level? Debatable. You know, he was a multiple-time All-Pro. He ended up finishing his career right under 100 sacks. That's pretty good. Neither of them are probably going to go down as great representation of what you expect from a top 5 pick. Reggie definitely disappoints in that regard. You say Reggie helped us get a chip? Well, again, I'm not trying to sound like a hater, but Reggie Bush didn't really do much in the playoffs. He didn't. Again, that's not trying to be a hater, but like Reggie didn't really contribute to the Super Bowl. He didn't really contribute to the NFC Championship game that much. Doesn't make him bad at all. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't Reggie Bush that won New Orleans the Super Bowl. Reggie Bush was a contributing player, and that's completely okay. That dude was a contributing player, and awesome. But Reggie Bush did not have a single game in the playoffs with New Orleans in 2009 where he caught more than 38 yards. Reggie Bush did not rush for more than 84 yards, and most of those yards came in one massive run against Arizona. In fact, Reggie Bush averaging his final 2 games between Minnesota and Indianapolis was averaging like 2.5 yards a carry. And he had 2 touchdowns in the entire playoffs. Meh. Yeah, that's not terrible. I'm just like, he did not carry the team to the Super Bowl and he did not win it on his shoulders. Reggie Bush did not live up to the number 2 overall pick hype. Not to mention that he also had fumbleitis. Reggie Bush literally recorded 20 fumbles with New Orleans. To make that stat even like compare it to something else, Reggie Bush scored 29 rushing and receiving touchdowns, and he had 19 fumbles. So he had 10 more TDs than he did fumbles. To give you a comparison of what that translates to another player, Mark Ingram, who holds the Saints team record for TDs as a running back, 57 rushing and receiving TDs, 17 fumbles. Alvin Kamara, give you another one. Alvin Kamara, who has been with the team, has got 11 fumbles in his career and 71 rushing and receiving TDs. You saying Darren Sproles? Yeah, I definitely am saying Darren Sproles. Again, Mound, you're missing the point where, one, Darren Sproles did what Reggie Bush couldn't do. Because Darren Sproles came in and literally was given Reggie Bush's role. People forget that. But Reggie left New Orleans in 2011. He went to Miami. Darren Sproles literally came into the same offense to do Reggie Bush's role and then proceeded to set the NFL record for all-purpose yards. Not just did really good, not just did good, literally set the NFL record. Also, for those curious, he had 2 fumbles in his 3-year career in New Orleans. Darren Sproles had 2 fumbles. How many? Here's the next question. How many TDs did he have? I'm so glad that you asked. So, Darren Sproles also brought in 22 touchdowns. So, Darren Sproles in his 3 years in New Orleans was averaging over 7 TDs a year. Guess who was not? Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush was not doing that. So, again, in terms of scoring the football, and in terms of yards, and in terms of impact in the offense, both Taysom Hill and Reggie Bush significantly provided more, or Taysom Hill and Darren Sproles provided more than Reggie Bush. That's just undeniable statistical facts. Now, you can like a guy, and that's completely cool. I love Reggie Bush, and he's still one of the best, like, former Saints of all time now, and still gives the city love, and I love that about him. But Darren wasn't all that, man. That's why we shipped him. That is not why. All right, y'all done forgot why Darren Sproles got shipped. Oh, man. And by that same logic, that's why Reggie Bush was let go. Like, you can't use that logic about Darren Sproles and then not about Reggie Bush. You can't use that logic about Darren Sproles and not about Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush didn't even make it to a second contract. They just like, yeah, you can go. Bye. And then they slotted in a guy who, one, grossly undersized, two, was a fourth-round draft pick versus a second, and that man broke NFL records. So, but you're not throwing off the show. This is all great chat. You know, this is off-season content. It's all great chat. I'm saying, like, when I look at X-players, Reggie Bush is my number 3. Now, I still would rather have him than Michael Lewis and other famous Saints X-factors. But truthfully, Reggie Bush did not live up to his second-round overall pick, and he definitely didn't score enough TDs. Taking more shots at Reggie than that one Eagles defender. I mean, Reggie still had awesome years in New Orleans. It just wasn't as great as it could be. I mean, let's do it this way. I'm going to read out stats, and we're just going to be honest. I know stats don't tell the whole story, but let's just be real quick. So Reggie Bush had 5 years in New Orleans. Now, I'm not going to blame him for being injured, but he did have a lot of injuries in New Orleans. That's just a fact. But Reggie Bush in 5 years in New Orleans, 2,000 rushing yards. That's it. 2,000 rushing yards and 110 first downs. That's it. By comparison, Mark Ingram, 6,500 rushing yards in New Orleans. Triple. Now, he did play 10 years in New Orleans versus 5 for Reggie, but he tripled his yardage numbers. Also, 52 rushing touchdowns for New Orleans. That's Mark Ingram, whereas 17 for Reggie Bush. So Reggie Bush was averaging about 3 rushing touchdowns a year. Ingram was averaging 5 rushing touchdowns a year. 110 rushing first downs for Reggie Bush. 332 for Mark Ingram. Triple the amount. Even if you go to the receiving side, which everybody talks about Reggie being an amazing receiver. Reggie Bush had 2,100 receiving yards. Mark Ingram had 1,800. There wasn't even a huge disparity there. And then you get to the problem part, which was fumbles. Mark Ingram played twice as many years as Reggie Bush and had less fumbles than the guy. I mean, if you're comparing who actually impacted the team more while being a New Orleans Saints running back, it's Mark Ingram. Just Reggie Bush did not live up to the hype of what he did, but he was still a very good player. He didn't live up to that level of hype. Sean didn't run him, but Sean also didn't run Mark Ingram. His first 3 years in the league, he used Mark Ingram as nothing but a short yardage back. He drafted Mark Ingram and then used him as Mike Bell, and Mark Ingram still outperformed everything Reggie Bush did. So, Alvin Kamara was like 10 years old in 2006. Damn, don't do that to me, Don. Don't do that to me, Don. Oh, my goodness. Don't do that to me. Where do I have Joe Horn? Joe Horn is my second best Saints receiver of all time. Michael Thomas, Joe Horn, Eric Martin, Marcus Colston. Michael Thomas, and honestly a massive gap after Michael Thomas, then Joe Horn, then Eric Martin, then Marcus Colston. All great players. All great players. Damn. This has been a good episode just getting into like some Saints history and discussing with y'all. It's we can all agree the best quarterback in Saints history though is Bobby Hebert, right? Bobby Hebert, number 1, then Aaron Brooks, then Drew Brees, and then Archie Manning, right? We can agree that's the top 4 quarterbacks in Saints history. Cool. Cool. Marcus Colston, second for you. Here's my biggest negative about Marcus Colston, Antonio. And again, I love Colston. Quiet Storm is the most underrated wide receiver of all time, in my opinion. But here's what I can't say about Joe Horn, Eric Martin, or Michael Thomas. They were all 3 the primary receivers in their prime for New Orleans. Anybody going to deny that? Is anybody going to deny that Michael Thomas, Eric Martin, and Joe Horn in their primes were the primary targets for the New Orleans offense? Nobody's going to deny that, right? Guess who wasn't the primary target in his prime? Marcus Colston. You know who was? Jimmy Graham. So that doesn't mean that Jimmy Graham or that Marcus Colston is bad. but he was never even the most dominant force on his offense. Michael Thomas was. Joe Horn was. Eric Martin was. Marcus Colston ended up being second fiddle to, the best receiving tight end New Orleans has ever seen. But I don't think that Colston was secretly the greatest wide receiver in the NFL that got undersold. I think that he was just a good wide receiver. What about Devery Henderson in the slot? I mean, I got nothing against Devery. He's a solid flanker. If I got to pick my best flanker in Saints history, it'd be not Darren Sproles. You got me talking about Darren Sproles. It'd be Brandon Cooks. That'd be the best flanker. Austin Carr, very nice, Lester. Very nice. Hey, nobody throws touchdowns like Willie Snead. Just saying. Nobody throws touchdowns like Willie Snead. Marcus Colston, the most underrated receiver. Now, see, that I agree with. Like, I can still say that I think that Thomas and Martin and Horn were better, but I do think that Marcus Colston is the most underrated receiver ever. So, but anyway, y'all, we've hit over an hour. We got to wrap it up so we can get ready for our next episode Tuesday. Remember, next week, we're starting our 3 episodes because we're going to be doing game follow-ups right after the game. We're going to be talking about it, hopefully, getting some Jake Hayner. What's Traquan Smith rate? Traquan Smith is, to be honest, I need to change my. It's Traquan Smith, Juju Smith-Schuster, and then Michael Thomas is the best Saints wide receivers of all time. So appreciate y'all. I do love y'all. Y'all are great. I really appreciate y'all being here. Can't wait to see y'all in the next episode. Who dat? God bless. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Thanks for all the support. Hit the like button on your way out. Deuces, that's me. Catch y'all on the next one. Who dat? God bless. And love and appreciate every single one of you. We out.